Hey guys, I want to talk about a TV series today that really hasn't gotten a lot of press and is something I didn't really hear about until like the last couple of months. It's based on a 90s video game called Twisted Metal, and for those unfamiliar, it's essentially a road racing game where you try to explode, shoot, and beat up your opponents into oblivion. And while it sounds relatively simple on the surface, it separated itself from other like-minded games by actually having a story. A story that was interesting, well-written, and very compelling. Now, I'm not going to say it's on the level of The Godfather or Schindler's List, but in terms of video game stories in the 90s, this is pretty well up there. Now, admittingly, when I came into the TV show, it's been a while since I actually played the games. And if I recall correctly, the last game, Twisted Metal 2012, came out over 10 years ago, so I figured it was one of those series that was just going to be kind of lackluster. I really wasn't expecting much. Not that I didn't think the story didn't have any potential, because I did, but I thought if something like this was going to succeed, it would have to go to Netflix or Hulu or something. Now, for those unfamiliar, it's currently airing on Peacock. And to be honest with you, besides Twisted Metal, I can't name one original series that's come from Peacock, so my expectations were kind of low. I was like, well, this is probably their first major series that they're undertaking, and it's based on a video game that probably not too many people play anymore. And inevitably, I thought it would draw comparisons to Death Race, which was a fine enough movie, but it was nothing spectacular. But instead of getting a watered-down version of Death Race, we actually got something much better. Something that had better action, more enthralling characters, and a storyline that was interesting and compelling. And I gotta say, Twisted Metal hooked me from episode 1. It conjured up all my memories of the 90s when I played Twisted Metal 2 and Twisted Metal Black. Honestly made me feel like a kid again. Seeing characters like Sweet Tooth and Twister and Mr. Slam. And let me tell you something, Mr. Slam is a very humorous character. And speaking of humor, that was my initial trepidation with the series. Now, I saw the commercial on YouTube and I thought to myself, they're kind of going for a campy, satirical take on the series, which sort of makes sense because, let's be honest, the original games were campy and satirical. Especially the wishes at the end of the game. So I kind of tempered my expectations. I'm like, it's probably going to be okay to average, maybe a little bit below average, but nothing to write home about. But I'll be damned if they didn't freaking blow my dick off. I mean, this series was fantastic from episode 1 to episode 10. Yeah, it was a little bit over the top with the comedy in the beginning, but it's interesting. It had a disarming effect. It made you sort of think that the series was going in a certain direction, and then all of a sudden you're getting the darker, solemn tones. You're starting to learn more about John Doe and his past and how tragic it is, and how tragic the whole world is to begin with. And let's be honest, the tragic elements sort of harken to The Last of Us, which came out earlier this year. Now, some of you may consider this to be sort of a ripoff, but this actually works for the series. Not so much because it's a great world environment that allows for exploration into darker themes, but the Twisted Metal franchise has always sort of quote-unquote borrowed elements from popular culture and used it within its own universe. There was always sort of a wink and a nod with the original games where it's like, yeah, you know what we're doing, but we also know what we're doing and we're okay with that. And speaking of winks and nods, I mean, this series has so many callbacks to the previous games. Literally every episode is littered with callbacks. I mean, you see Outlaw, Twister, Blackfield Asylum where Sweet Tooth was locked up for a number of years. And how could we forget Sweet Tooth himself, what an interesting character he is. I mean, he's always been a fan favorite, let's be honest with ourselves, but the way they sort of gave you an insight into his past as a child actor and how that sort of drove him into insanity and how he was neglected by his parents was so well done. And I gotta say, that's one of the great elements of this series is that it can give you a backstory in about 2 or 3 minutes and make it feel impactful and weighty. You don't have to go into a whole episode about Sweet Tooth's past, how his stepfather was mean to him. Like, you really get it in those 2 to 3 minute segments, and then you can move on with the story again. And I gotta say, Harold obviously is one of the best characters in the series. The jokes including him are among the best in the series, and it is an interesting callback to the first game. Because, spoiler alert, if you played the first game and won as Sweet Tooth, his wish to Calypso was to have a brown paper bag. So that's an interesting little callback there, something probably not a lot of people caught on to, but very fun stuff. Of course, Sweet Tooth eventually by the end of the series gets his head caught on fire. That's an interesting callback as well. And just the amount of characters that they're throwing into the series and doing it in a way that is authentic to the characters themselves. One of the best things I think they did was that they didn't try to go for some sort of ulterior motive with this series. It wasn't about Hollywood trying to shove a certain message down your throat. No, they just literally stayed true to the series itself. They gave you the action, they gave you the jokes, they gave you the solemn, dark backstories, and they gave you the fun. And that's what Twisted Metal was always about. It was a fun freaking game. It was colorful, dark, funny, scary, and grotesque in some moments. And that's exactly what the series gave us, and I just loved it. Now, I gotta say, I was a little bit worried throughout the series because I was like, well, is this just gonna be a simple one and done? Are they gonna do the 10 episodes and sort of give us a pseudo ending that sort of wraps up the story but doesn't really give us what we wanted? Because in the first season, John Doe is a milkman and he's doing certain jobs to make ends meet. Now, it kind of has some Twisted Metal vibes, he's fighting people along the way, but it's not the standard Twisted Metal tournament. But I believe by episode about 6 or 7, we meet Calypso. And at that point, I kind of got the feeling that the series was going to progress into a second, third, fourth season. And that's exactly what we got by the end of episode 10, is that there's going to be a Twisted Metal tournament. And not only that, but all the characters that we saw in the first season, like Preacher and Roadkill and John Doe and Sweet Tooth, not only are they going to be there, but there's going to be other characters. Among them, fan favorites like Mr. Grimm, Axel, Dollface, and potentially many more. I would imagine at some point we're probably going to see Warthog and potentially even Minion. I mean, I don't know how you do a Twisted Metal franchise without Minions, so I feel like a kid in a candy store again. I can't believe how good this series was. It was so entertaining, and it's so refreshing when you walk into a show and you're not expecting much. This was a franchise in the 90s that I would have never expected a series to be made of. Like I said, it definitely had the potential, but I just never figured a studio would take it seriously enough. But lo and behold, that's exactly what we got. So guys, I definitely implore you to watch Twisted Metal. Like I said, it's on Peacock. I'm not getting paid by Peacock or anything like that, but Twisted Metal is an exciting romp that you need to see, and goddamn, I can't wait for season 2 now. It's 10 episodes of pure greatness, but man, you're gonna be wanting more from this. It's gonna be a fun freaking ride, no pun intended, and I can't wait to see what Calypso has in store for the Twisted Metal participants. But tell me your Twisted Metal experiences in the comments, guys. I'd really love to hear that. It's a game I played a lot when I was a kid, and seeing the series do this well is so exciting and so great. So yeah, thanks for listening. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the flip side.